yet. It'll just take me a moment to get everything running again here. All right, you are good to proceed.
Thanks, Rob. We are now in open session. We only discuss what we went and discussed in camera, nothing more. We're moving off the agenda. We're down to redevelopment update. Kim, I believe I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So after our last council meeting, I confirmed with the province that we had in fact passed the bylaw to secure the new piece of property for Rockwood Terrace. I'm now trying to set up a call with the people at licensing at the Ministry of Long-Term Care to confirm what the next steps are from their perspective. Some of you will recall from earlier discussions about redevelopment, there's an aspect of the project that has to do with a community consultation and confirming the site of the new facility. Before we got into the COVID piece, the province had made some adjustments to that so that they had greater flexibility. And so what I need to understand from them is whether they intend to exercise that flexibility, simply confirm site, and then allow us to move forward from there. We also had earlier created a communications plan for the project that was submitted at the time we put the application in. I want to revisit that. Certainly the information that's on the Grey County site with regard to redevelopment is quite dated. And so I think if we're going to move into a new phase with this, we might want to archive the material that's there and then move on forward from that. I did want to talk to the committee about the kind of the process independent of what the province's requirements are. Because we have a significant piece of property and there's a lot of potential here to take things in a number of different directions, it's my advice that we get to an overall vision for the site that will then allow us to site the long-term care home within that property overall. So as a first step to that, I'm intending to bring in some West Grey folks and some county folks. So at a staff level, economic development, planning, the CAOs, et cetera, to really look at the site overall and see, based on what we understand with regard to the roads and the servicing and the things that we feel are important to have on the site, what should go where. In addition to the long-term care facility itself, if we're looking at this site to supply that campus of care and that additional housing, ability to age in place, I think there may be some other amenities that we want to see there at some point, like some sort of a community type facility, or opportunities for more active living, whether that's a trail system or some sort of a recreation facility. How do we want to deal with things like energy efficiency and total cost of ownership? So all of those discussions need to happen. Our paramedic base in Durham is one that probably needs to be looked at in the very near future. Is that another physical aspect of this that we should be looking at, is intending to have a new paramedic base on this site as well, and on it goes. So the intention would be to have that initial brainstorming session, identify some of these things and then bring that back to this committee and to council. The points that were made earlier in the meeting about how long-term care may change in the future are well taken. I'm hoping with the discussions with the province that we can get a little bit of insight from them about where they're thinking things might go, whether they feel that the design guidelines as they stand for new homes are sufficient, or are they likely to change? It's my understanding that some of the homes that struggled most significantly through this last little while were the Ulster styled homes where you had more shared rooms. The current design guidelines still allow you to have semi-private or 2 people into a room. I want to know if that's going to continue or if we're going to go just all private. Do we need to have space, isolation space, thought out and built into a new building before we start? So all of those things are questions. There's still an outstanding question with regard to with the Grey Gables property and what might happen there. I'd like to know if there's some sense of the timelines. When we got into COVID, the province took the timeline around that next set of application decisions off the table. So are they intending to bring that back for discussion at any time soon? If we are going to go out for for RFP around design or design build, again, we're going to have to talk about the pros and cons of the different models. Are we asking people to take on 2 projects or 1? So I need to understand that as well from the province. So that's where we are. I think for the June 9th meeting, if I can get the staff visioning session set up on the 4th or 5th, I at least can have some high-level discussions about some of the things that we talked about. And hopefully I'll have had an update from the province at the same time, so that by the time we get to the next meeting, I can give you some more information.
Thanks, Kim. Councillor Leary, did you get your question answered?
Well, sort of. Kim, she did talk about, whether we were going to double up rooms and that. I wish I knew where I heard or read this, but I heard someone say that moving forward, long-term care homes will be single rooms. And that scares me to death, because we've already gone ahead with this entire project without any cost analysis. And that's going to make a big difference. If these new builds are going to be single rooms, that has to be a bigger building. And you know that, Mr. Chair, it's just not going to work. So I think the sooner we find out about the actual design and layout, what the government's going to make us do, and if they are making us have single rooms, are they going to pay more money because of the extra cost that will occur? But yeah, she did pretty much cover that. Thank you.
If I can add, depending on what we do and where we go with additional housing on the site and the model that that housing comes together under, I really want to look at a business plan for this whole thing, and to see whether or not there are any opportunities for us to offset any of these expenses one way or another. So there's just a lot of moving parts and a lot of unknowns right now, but your points are well taken.
Thanks, Kim.
Mr. Chair, if I might.
Go ahead, Christine.
Thank you, and through you. And I do appreciate there are a lot of moving parts, certainly when you're doing a new build, that is taken under consideration. I quite like the idea of the brainstorming with staff, and also understanding what the functionality and the footprint will be of the Rockwood Terrace property. What I'm most interested in is understanding that there's, maybe a business plan coming forward, a staff report dealing with brainstorming. Could we have a timeline in place that would identify when these milestones are taking place, which will also include a design component and an RFP consideration. So looking at where we are now and the balance of 2020 and going on to 2021, what are the milestones that we need to achieve in order to have this building in place and obviously open for business for 2025.
Thanks,
Okay.
Christine. Before I turn it over to Kim, I really, again, feel that with the pandemic and what's going on, the province is going to have to extend this 2025 date. There's just too many moving parts, even for them, to make that date stick. Kim, do you want to comment on Christine's?
I am 100% behind the idea of having a project plan and the right people brought into this to undertake the work moving forward. That's absolutely where we want to be. I need to know from the province, though, where they see any changes coming, right? We don't want to move ahead only to have to double back. So if they can provide us some assurance of, and some stability around what design guidelines there are, what potential, like if they're thinking that they're changing the funding model again or anything like that, we need some indication of that so that we can plan and make decisions appropriately. So I'll be looking to them to provide some confirmation and some assurance that we are in the right place to be able to move ahead. And if we're not, what needs to happen from the province's perspective and when do they anticipate seeing that happen? So I think we're united in the right goal, and I'm
Sure.
hoping that we will be able to move forward.
So
Thanks, Kim.
supplementary to that, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
So I'm wondering through you to our warden, if Warden McQueen's had any conversation with MPP Walker in terms of potential changes to guidelines for long-term care or a funding model and just a path forward to move this development along.
Mr. Warden?
I have not had any high-level discussions with Minister Walker on that. I think just more with the ministry staff. I've had a couple of conversations, but certainly I want to have some conversations there, and certainly we'll maybe push to have more further conversations about that. Just going back to the whole part about with Kim's comments with regards to a bigger picture, certainly developing a site plan or developing how the site could be developed is a good idea. And then I think once you develop that component, then you develop where on that site the long-term care facility would go, and then you could get moving on with that part and all that. I certainly would encourage, and I think you mentioned it, Kim, with great discussion with West Grey Council and your staff, as they may have spots for future police stations, future fire halls, future infrastructure things that maybe it's on their plate. And that goes back to you, your worship, Robinson, in the sense of having those, because this is in Durham and that's your largest urban center. So certainly working together makes a lot of sense. You know, that 32-acre site inside the Durham boundaries is a good opportunity. But I think in the sense of time frame, developing the site, but not getting hung up what goes where, just sort of developing the site and then determining where you might have that site for the long-term care, and then you can get moving with that component for sure. Just going back to the comment with regards to Councillor Leary, certainly I can see there will be new direction in the sense of able to isolate individuals in the long-term care home. But one of those things could be with, and we see it in a lot of new buildings, is a partition wall that moves in and out, which won't have this, I wouldn't think would have the same cost as building individual rooms, but the ability to isolate rooms through a partition wall. And we see those at a number of our different facilities that may help curb some of that cost. You still achieve the objective of having to isolate individuals, but then not having as big a cost. So I think there's a lot of discussion that needs to happen and a lot of options that could be to achieve that same thing with less cost. So, those are things that I think could be implemented. But certainly as your warden and that, there's times where it comes to a point where there's some high level discussions. I would think that would probably include staff, probably myself, maybe the chair of long-term care and the director, in the sense of, because we'll want to have some conversations here, and with the direction and guidance of our CAO, we know that we are moving forward with these projects, and very important that timing is something. And I certainly agree, Mr. Chair, 2025 is maybe something that I know that was set a long time ago, and there may be some resets on that, because moving forward, we want to make sure we get it right. And there's, taking time to get it right is just as important as doing it. And we just got to steady as we go. And Madam CEO, we certainly will, entrust in your guidance of how we move forward with this. But certainly there's a lot of components that need to be attended to. And my clock's going ding dong, so I better shut up.
Thank you,
getting
Mr.
used to
Warden.
that.
Councilor Leary, go to you first. I seen your hand up.
Well, I just wanted to quickly mention, just from Christine's comments, I wanted to ask that we not go to a motion, and just kind of remember that we're still in the middle of an emergency and we should be sensitive to the CAO schedule. And by the sounds of it, I think she's on the same page as, some of the things that we've asked about. So I think we're going to get there without a motion. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilor Robson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the things that I would propose is that we consider an AMO delegation. If there's an opportunity to speak with the Premier or Minister of Long-Term Care, I think that would be appropriate, just to identify where we are in the process, and that we've got some questions, and that we're using our due diligence, but we want to get this project underway, and we've got residents that wish to live in this new facility. So that's one of the things I would look at this committee to consider, and ultimately council to make the decision of putting this as a delegation to AMO. Also, at the appropriate time, we do need to get a communication out to our residents again in terms of where we're at. Residents know that we've got the property in place, but what are the next steps, and what can our Grey County residents expect in terms of the development of Rockwood Terrace?
Thanks, Christine. Kim, care to comment?
No, as I said, I think that we need to revisit the communications plan and make sure that it's accurately reflecting what we know and where we are, and move forward on that. Absolutely, people have questions. Although we've passed the bylaw to obtain the new property for Rockwood Terrace, we don't actually close on that deal for a little minute too. So I am a little bit sensitive to make sure that everything's done and dusted from there before we go too far ahead. But I don't think there's any reason that we wouldn't be able to communicate in a more fulsome way with the public sometime in June, at least before the summer comes and people kind of attend to different things. I would like to get something in front of people before that.
Thanks, Kim.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Warden.
Just to follow up with, thank you for the comments. Certainly, as Councillor Leary has said about COVID, and we need to sort of move through that steps of sort of starting to, what's the new reality of COVID. A good idea. We know that AMO is going to be a virtual conference, and certainly there will be details coming out with the opportunity to set up delegations, I'm sure, with ministers and stuff. But I must remind everybody, we can always make those delegation requests at any time, that if we feel it's important that we need to talk to the Minister of Long-Term Care and through our Minister Walker and others, we can always make those requests. It's interesting how one thing out of COVID-19, we can have meetings pretty soon, pretty quick, with Zoom and everything now. So it seems to be, it has, the one thing out of that is inspired us to other options of meeting and maybe getting some face-to-face answers and questions, or questions and answers to our questions. So certainly, Your Worship, Councilor Robinson, in the sense of making that delegation request, I can work with Kim and we can bring back that further discussion maybe in June, but certainly, it doesn't hurt to ask for those, and is August, is that maybe too late to have some guidance and if we need that? And I think from our Madam CEO, if you feel that from you're not getting answers and we need to do that, certainly
Right.
we can move toward that. That's another option, right? And that sort of thing, because we're in the middle of 1 or 2 developments here, and there's so we sort of have a lot on the table here right now, and we want to make sure we get some of those answers and how do we move forward, and so there's a lot of moving parts, but let's and if we make those requests, it's sort of like thank you very much. How do we move forward? So can we encourage your guidance on all this stuff, so we sort of open up our arms, or help us out here, and it's not a criticizing delegation, but it's more or less an information, and here's some ideas, and I always like when we do delegations that we don't go there criticizing it, but you come with concerns and you come with solutions, and that's always a positive
Right.
way of moving forward in a lot of ways. So I hope that helps.
Thanks, Mr. Warden. Kim, Councillor Robson, I think we should leave this solely at the discretion of our CEO to be able to catch up. And I'm quite sure she will bring everything forward at the appropriate time to our committee and to county council. I understand you're anxious to get things moving and so on, but I'm quite sure our CEO's really talented when it comes to how to bring things out to the public and everyone else. So I think we should just leave it to our CEO to bring it back to us at an appropriate time.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
So I'm wondering, could we invite Minister Fullerton out to one of our long-term care meetings? I mean, AMIL's a great idea. I put it forward. I think having an AMIL delegation for sure, but just based on what Warden McQueen had identified, that there's opportunities to have meetings with the province. So perhaps we invite Minister Fullerton out and get some questions answered.
That could very well be, but maybe I still want to fall back to our CEO to let her catch her breath and move forward accordingly. That's one of my suggestions. Kim?
Yes, and many of the aspects of the redevelopment project are actually in legislation. So there's not a tremendous amount of discretion. It's just a matter of moving through the process. I will do my very best to get us caught up so that we do have a firm sense of timelines for the June 9th meeting. And hopefully from there, then we'll be in a good place. If we want to engage with other conversations with elected officials, then we will be in a good spot to do that.
Thanks, Kim. Is there any other discussion on our redevelopment? Seeing none, I'll move forward with our agenda down to other business. Before we get to the nursing week, Councillor Robson, you had a question maybe that Jennifer might be able to ask in case she has to leave. Do you want to ask that question again?
Oh, certainly, Mr. Chair, and through you. Jennifer, I was wondering if we've had any citizen volunteers that have expressed an interest in working with any of our long-term care homes, and what your comment would be on that, please.
Jennifer?
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. So I have not received any specific offers of volunteering within the homes. I think that people are very aware of the limitations and the goal to minimize the number of people coming in and out of long-term care homes right now. Having said that, the community support for the homes, the residents, and all of the staff in them has been overwhelmingly wonderful. The community just continues to rally and support and cheer on our staff who are working tirelessly to keep things as normal as possible for the residents and keep COVID kind of out of the homes. So at this point, that's my comments on that question. The support's been amazing.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Absolutely. And thank you for the comment.
Okay. Nurses Week. Should be a Nurses Day, 365 days a year, but anyway, it is quite well noted.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'm just going to highlight some information from the end of my kind of previous. From my previous report. So Nurses Week is this week, May 11th to 17th. And it's also the year of the nurse. 2020 is the year of the nurse. So that's fairly prophetic. I don't think that was, I've read some information on social media that if only they had realized how timely that would be. So I just want to do a shout out to all of the nurses within our organizations and across our region. And we're celebrating Nurses Week by celebrating all staff in long-term care, everyone in every department who keeps everything going, are working really hard. And so one of the initiatives that we're doing to support all staff is that we're giving each team member a Grey County Color It Hero t-shirt. So they're really lovely. You'll have to watch for them out and about. Their black t-shirt with the county logo, and on the back it says Color It Hero. And they very much have earned that title. And I just wanted to acknowledge all of the hard work and the commitment and the dedication.
Thanks, Jennifer. Well done. Moving on to our agenda. It's been a great meeting. Our next meeting is June the 9th. If we no other business, I have a motion moved by Councillor O'Leary, second by Councillor Robson, that we adjourn. All in favor? We're now